In this section, we'll be exploring the life and thoughts of Socrates, a very important figure in the history of philosophy. Socrates wasn't just interested in knowledge, he also focused on things like the purpose of human existence and living a good life. He believed that people should question themselves and turned philosophy into a way of life. We'll start by looking at some important events from Socrates' life, and then we'll dive into his philosophical ideas and understanding of morality. No other philosopher has left such a mark on the world. It's like there's philosophy before Socrates and philosophy after Socrates. But strangely enough, even though he was such an important thinker, we don't have any of Socrates' writings. Some historians believe that Socrates chose not to write anything because he thought the spoken word was more powerful. Most of what we know about Socrates comes from the writings of his students, Xenophon and especially Plato. Plato wrote a lot of books called dialogues, and he used Socrates as the main character to share his ideas and way of life. Socrates believed that true wisdom wasn't about knowing everything, but about knowing what you don't know. Socrates turned philosophy into a way of life. He was a thinker who looked inward and questioned everything. His philosophy had a huge impact, not just on ancient Greece, but on all of Western philosophy, and people are still interested in it today. Socrates lived from 469 to 399 BC. He's one of the most influential and controversial figures in the history of philosophy. Born in Athens, the son of a sculptor, Socrates spent most of his life in this city. After completing his military service, he worked as a sculptor for a while, like his father. But then he turned to philosophy. Unlike traditional teachers, Socrates practiced philosophy everywhere. In the streets, in the marketplace, anywhere people gathered. He developed the Socratic method, a way of teaching that encourages people to think for themselves instead of just giving them information. This method involves asking the other person questions to help them discover their own thoughts and find the truth. This is how Socrates lived his life, searching for both wisdom and virtue. Although Socrates' philosophy shared some similarities with the sophists' philosophy, there were also important differences. While the sophists often had a relativist view, Socrates believed in an objective and universal truth. Also, while the sophists usually charged fees for their lessons, Socrates offered his philosophy for free and never asked his students for money. Socrates' life, thoughts and behavior attracted criticism from some groups in Athens. He was put on trial for not believing in the gods and corrupting the youth. Socrates defended his philosophical views, but he was found guilty and sentenced to death. Even though he was sentenced to death, he refused the opportunity to escape from Athens and stood by his beliefs. This act of defiance made him immortal in the history of philosophy. Socrates wasn't just a philosopher, he offered a way of life. His philosophy centers around self-reflection, seeking wisdom, and living a virtuous life. His philosophical legacy continues to resonate even today. Socrates is famous for saying, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." This doesn't mean Socrates thought he was totally clueless. It means he understood the limits of knowledge and how much effort it takes to learn. For Socrates, true wisdom wasn't about knowing everything, but about knowing what you don't know. When the oracle at Delphi said he was the wisest man in Athens, Socrates didn't think he was smarter than everyone else. He thought he was wiser because he realized he didn't know everything while others thought they did. Socrates used a method called the art of midwifery to help people discover the knowledge they already had inside them. He would ask questions to get people thinking and help them find their own answers. Socrates compared this method to a midwife helping a baby be born. He believed he was helping people give birth to the knowledge inside their minds. Socrates believed there was a strong connection between virtue and knowledge. He believed that evil comes from ignorance. People do wrong things not because they know better, but because they don't. That's why it's important to seek knowledge to live a virtuous life. Socrates believed that the main goal of philosophy was to understand the true meaning of concepts. He would ask questions like, what is justice? And what is virtue? To try and find clear definitions for these ideas. Socrates believed that the correct definition of a concept should apply to all examples of that concept and should set it apart from other concepts. Socrates disagreed with the sophists, who were important thinkers of his time. While the sophists often had a relativist view, Socrates believed in an objective and universal truth. Also, while the sophists usually charged fees for their lessons, Socrates offered his philosophy for free and never asked his students for money. Socrates made important contributions to the history of philosophy. The Socratic method became a fundamental tool of philosophy and was adopted by many philosophers. His ideas about virtue, knowledge, and justice formed the foundation of Western philosophy. Socrates turned philosophy into a way of life. He was a thinker who looked inward and questioned everything. His philosophy wasn't just about knowledge, but also about how to live a good life. Socrates' legacy shows us that philosophy isn't just something you study, it's a way of searching for meaning in life. Socrates was a philosopher who made significant contributions to moral philosophy. His understanding of morality is based on the close relationship between knowledge and virtue. According to Socrates, knowledge is the key to virtue. People don't intentionally do bad things. Evil stems from ignorance. Therefore, attaining knowledge is essential for leading a virtuous life. Virtue is a learnable skill. Socrates argues that virtue is not an innate trait, but a skill that can be learned. This skill is acquired by attaining accurate knowledge and acting accordingly. Socrates argues that there is an inner voice within each person that guides them towards good and right. This inner voice helps individuals make righteous decisions. Socrates believes that fearing death is pointless, because death means either the complete end of life or the beginning of another life. In both cases, there is no need for fear. Socrates argues that moral values are universal, not relative. He believes that concepts like good and evil, right and wrong, have the same meaning for everyone. Reliance on knowledge, according to Socrates, moral decisions should be made based on knowledge. Decisions made without knowledge are often wrong and harmful. Socrates emphasizes that each individual is responsible for their own actions. People should make their own decisions and face the consequences. Socrates believes that learning is a lifelong process. People should constantly learn new things and improve themselves. Socrates' understanding of morality focuses on individuals discovering their inner potential and living a virtuous life. Socrates argues that attaining knowledge is the key to making right decisions and living a happy life. His philosophy is considered an important philosophical legacy that remains relevant and influences many people even today. Knowledge forms the foundation of virtue. The main teachings of Socrates can be listed as follows: encouraging thinking by asking questions, having an inner guide that leads to goodness and righteousness, focusing on life instead of fearing death, realizing that concepts like good and evil are universal, knowing that each individual is responsible for their own actions, being open to learning throughout life.